Up until last month, I believed I had my life worked out. My name is Lillian, and I am 42. It wasn't flawless, of course. My entire life was flipped upside down when I lost David in that terrible tragedy 4 years ago, but I was able to keep on. I raised our kid by myself, immersed myself in my marketing profession at Preston and Associates, and discovered that isolation can bring me serenity. Now that Sarah has left for college, the house feels more empty. One phone call altered all of it. My mobile phone buzzed as I was looking over campaign analytics for our newest customer. I smiled when I saw the name of my younger brother, Tommy, on the screen. Despite the fact that he was now 34 and married, he had always remained my baby brother. "Hey, Squirt," I said, referring to him by my previous moniker. "Lil," he said, his voice breaking. There was a problem. "I need your help." I straightened my posture on my workplace chair. "What's going on?" The business unexpectedly declared bankruptcy. "We all lost our jobs yesterday," he said, pausing, and I could hear him straining to remain calm. "Rachel and I are no longer able to pay for our rent. I'm sorry to ask, but..." My stomach grew constricted. At every family get-together, Tommy's wife of 2 years, Rachel, had expressed her belief that she was too nice for our middle-class family. She had grumbled that the champagne wasn't pricey enough during their wedding. Tommy went on, "We need a place to stay. Until I get another work, that is. Lil, please." I thought about my vacant house as I surveyed my empty workplace. When Mom returned to work, I assisted in raising my infant brother, Tommy. I recalled assisting him with his schoolwork, teaching him how to ride a bike, and protecting him from bullies. I heard myself respond, "Of course you can stay with me," despite a voice in my brain screaming, "What about Rachel?" "What do you need to move in?" His words were, "End of the week. We have to be out of our apartment by then." I sat looking at my computer screen after we hung up, not really seeing it. Once more, the phone rang. It was Mom this time. She said, "Lillian, Tommy just told us you're letting them stay with you," without introducing herself. "That's so wonderful of you." Remember what Rachel said at Easter, don't you, Mom? Regarding how my home appeared to have been furnished by a tasteless suburban housewife. Mom let out a sigh. "My sweetheart, she's young. Since then, she has most likely grown up, and Tommy needs this. You are aware of his nature. He takes things extremely personally. He has been deeply disturbed by losing his job." Yes, I was aware. That was the issue. Tommy's sensitivity, desire to please, and need for acceptance had always been present. It was the reason he was such a good child, and why he was so oblivious to his wife's shortcomings. "I understand, Mom." I said yes for that reason. I wondered about my house, my ostentatiously adorned home, after I hung up with Mom, trying to psychologically be ready for what was about to happen. Fresh linens would be needed in the guest room. I would have to make place in the garage for their belongings, and I would have to figure out how to live with Rachel without killing her. The day of the move came as subtly as a cyclone. I heard Tommy's voice, the click-clack of heels on my driveway, and the bang of a car door as I was working from home that morning. I inhaled deeply before opening the front door. "Lil." Tommy's familiar smile lit up his face as he hurried over to give me a hug. "Thank you so much for this." Rachel was standing behind him, looking at my front porch with the type of look you get when you look for gum on high-end shoes. The cream-colored jacket she wore was likely more expensive than my monthly mortgage payment. Even though she was moving, her black hair was groomed flawlessly. Her greeting was, "Well, at least there's plenty of space," as she wheeled the first of what appeared to be 6 identical luxury luggage in the direction of the entrance. Tommy came to her aid right away, leaving me to stand there and wonder what I had gotten myself into. After spending the previous weekend getting the guest room ready, I escorted them there. "It's a bit quaint," Rachel said, stroking the dresser with a manicured finger. "But I suppose it'll have to do." I turned to Tommy and bit my tongue. "I think we ought to discuss the arrangements and home rules." I tried to seem impartial as I stated, "I work long hours at Preston and Associates. I often leave around 7 and return at 6 o'clock or later. Throughout the week, I won't be able to prepare meals or clean for you all." Rachel jerked her head up. "Cook? Clean? Do you think we'll do that?" "Well, yes," I said, looking her in the eye. "You both live here as adults without paying rent. I'm counting on you to look for yourselves." Rachel's neatly styled eyebrows furrowed. She said, "I don't cook," as though she didn't know how to use chainsaws. I have never been forced to learn. Our meals were delivered or we always ate out. I gave a shrug. "Well, I suppose you'll either learn your lesson, get takeout if you can afford it, or starve. This isn't a bed and breakfast that I own." The weeks that followed fell into an unexpected pattern. I rarely saw them during weekdays, buried in my work at the office. When I'd come home, tired and ready for some quiet time, I'd find Tommy in the kitchen, usually wearing one of my aprons, putting the finishing touches on dinner. Despite everything, it warmed my heart to see him taking charge like that. Weekends were different. I'd cook our family favorites: pot roast, chicken parmesan, Mom's famous meatloaf. Tommy would enthusiastically help and praise every dish. Rachel, however, would barely touch her food, pushing it around her plate with her fork. We used to eat at Lamy's Own every Sunday. She sighed one evening, eyeing my pot roast like it might bite her. "Remember that, Tommy?" The chef there trained in Paris. I watched my brother's face fall slightly, but he quickly recovered, reaching for her hand. "Your cooking is great, Lil," he said loyally. "Just like Mom's." Rachel's nose wrinkled at the comparison, but I kept quiet. It wasn't my place to point out how my brother bent over backwards to accommodate her every whim, how he practically worshipped the ground she walked on, while she treated him like an inconvenience. Meanwhile, watching Tommy's job search was like watching someone try to climb a mountain in roller skates. Every evening, he'd come home from another interview, his shoulders a little more slumped, his smile a little more forced. He'd throw himself into cooking dinner, as if trying to prove his worth through perfectly seasoned chicken marsala. He did eventually land a position at a smaller firm. For 2 months, things looked up. He'd leave for work in the morning with renewed purpose, and even Rachel seemed less acidic. But then came the restructuring, and Tommy was the newest hire, making him the first to go. That evening, I was working late in my home office when I heard them arguing in their room. I tried to focus on my spreadsheets, but Rachel's voice carried through the walls like poison. "You're pathetic," she hissed. "I can't believe I'm stuck living with your sister because you're such a failure. God, what was I thinking marrying such a loser?" My hands clenched into fists. I wanted to storm in there to tell Rachel exactly what I thought of her, to defend my baby brother, but Tommy was 34 now, not the little boy who needed his big sister to fight his battles. I forced myself to stay in my chair, my heart aching as I heard him apologizing to her. The real breaking point came a week later. I walked into my house after a particularly grueling day at work to find what looked like the aftermath of a restaurant bombing. Empty takeout containers littered every surface, half-eaten spring rolls and pizza crusts lay abandoned on my coffee table. Sticky rings from drink glasses decorated my wooden surfaces. "What happened here?" I demanded, dropping my briefcase in shock. Rachel lounged on my couch, scrolling through her phone. She barely glanced up. "Oh, I had some friends over. We ordered lunch." "You had friends over?" I repeated slowly, feeling my blood pressure rise. Without asking me, and left my house looking like this. She shrugged, still not looking up. It's not a big deal. Tommy can clean it up when he gets back from his interview. Something snapped inside me. No, Rachel, that's not how this works. First of all, you don't invite people to someone else's house without asking permission. Second, you're not working. The least you could do is clean up after yourself. That got her attention. Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Excuse me, are you suggesting I should be your maid just because you're letting us stay here? How dare you try to exploit me like this? She cried. Exploit you? I laughed incredulously. You live in my house, rent-free, contribute nothing, and think basic courtesy is exploitation. Rachel's face crumpled into tears just as Tommy walked in. Perfect timing as always. Baby, what's wrong? He rushed to her side. Your sister, Rachel sobbed dramatically. She's trying to turn me into her personal servant. She says I have to clean everything just because we're staying here. We're guests here. No, I corrected her. You're family members. I'm helping out. There's a difference in family respects each other's space and property. Rachel stood up, chin raised defiantly. I won't be treated like this. I don't clean, and that's final. I watched as Tommy silently began gathering the takeout containers, his face red with embarrassment. Part of me wanted to stop him, to force Rachel to take responsibility for once, but the defeated look in his eyes told me it would be pointless. After another failed interview, Tommy stopped cooking. He'd spend hours staring at his laptop, mechanically clicking through job listings, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a hollow desperation. One evening, after Tommy had gone to bed early claiming a headache, I made a decision. Sitting in my car in the office parking lot, I pulled out my phone and called a number I hadn't dialed in months. Lillian's Uncle James, David's own uncle, answered on the second ring. What a pleasant surprise, he said warmly. James Morrison wasn't really my uncle anymore, technically speaking, but he'd always treated me like family, even after David's death. As CEO of Morrison Technologies, he built one of the largest tech companies in the region. Uncle James, I need a favor, I said, explaining Tommy's situation. He's qualified. He just needs a chance. But I hesitated. If I help him directly, it'll crush what's left of his confidence. Say no more, Uncle James replied warmly. Send me his resume. The next evening, I casually dropped a sticky note on the kitchen counter while Tommy was cooking dinner. Hey, I saw this job posting today, I mentioned, trying to sound nonchalant. The position looked perfect for your background. You should give them a call. The transformation in Tommy the next morning was immediate. He wore his best suit, the one he'd worn to his wedding, newly pressed. His hand shook slightly as he adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror. Wish me luck, he called out as he left. I waited anxiously all day, pretending to focus on work while really checking my phone every few minutes. Uncle James had promised to handle things discreetly, but I still worried something might go wrong. When I got home that evening, Tommy was practically bouncing off the walls with excitement. I got it, he announced before I could even set down my briefcase. They offered me the position right there in the interview. The salary is amazing, Lil, better than my last job. We need to celebrate. I'm cooking something special tonight. As Tommy busied himself in the kitchen preparing a signature ribeye steak, Rachel sat down at the dining table, giving me a cold look. You know, Lillian, she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. You could have actually helped your brother find a job all these months. With all your connections in marketing, you could have found him something decent. But you just sat there watching him struggle. Some sister you are. She smiled smugly. But look at him now. He did it all by himself, without your help. Proves he doesn't need you after all. I kept my face neutral as I helped Tommy set the table, letting her words roll off me. If she only knew the truth. The day Tommy and Rachel moved out was surprisingly calm. 3 months of steady paychecks had allowed them to put down a deposit on a nice apartment across town. I helped Tommy load their boxes into the moving truck while Rachel supervised from the sidelines, tapping away on her phone. "Thanks for everything, Lee," Tommy said, hugging me awkwardly in the driveway. Rachel was already in their car, engine running, manicured fingers drumming impatiently on the steering wheel. "Anytime, little brother," I replied, watching as he climbed into the passenger seat. Rachel pulled away without so much as a backward glance or wave goodbye. Life settled back into its familiar rhythms. The house felt emptier again, but peaceful. No more passive-aggressive comments over dinner. No more mess to clean up after Rachel's friends. I threw myself into work and weekly video calls with Sarah, who was flourishing in her final year of college. Then came Sarah's graduation. I sat in the audience, bursting with pride, as she walked across the stage to receive her diploma. That evening, over dinner, she told me she'd accepted a job offer in Michigan. I hugged her tight, feeling that bittersweet mix of joy and loss that seems to define parenthood. Meanwhile, Tommy's life seemed to be on an upward trajectory. At first, we talked regularly. He called to tell me about his successes at Morrison Technologies. But gradually, the calls became less frequent, then stopped altogether. When I tried calling him, it would go straight to voicemail. Mom kept me updated during our Sunday calls. "Tommy's doing so well," she gushed. "He just got another promotion. Rachel's been talking about them buying a house." I listened, glad that my secret intervention had worked out so well, even if it meant losing my brother in the process. Uncle James occasionally mentioned Tommy's progress too, always with a knowing look that acknowledged our shared secret. Then came the call that changed everything. I was working from home one Tuesday morning when my phone rang. It was Aunt Marie, Mom's younger sister. "Lillian, sweetheart, I'm so excited about next weekend. I just picked out the perfect gift for Tommy and Rachel's new place. That neighborhood is absolutely gorgeous. They've done so well for themselves." I felt like I'd been doused with ice water. "What housewarming party?" I asked. There was a long pause on the other end. "Oh," Aunt Marie's voice grew uncertain. "The one next Saturday." "Didn't Tommy invite you?" "No," I said quietly, "he didn't." "But that can't be right," she continued, flustered. "You're his sister. Everyone's going. Your parents, Rachel's family, even some of Tommy's colleagues from work." I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, as Aunt Marie rambled on about gift registries and catering. The brother I'd helped get back on his feet, the one I'd protected since childhood, hadn't even thought to invite me to celebrate his success. My hands were shaking as I dialed Tommy's number. For once, he picked up. "Tommy, why didn't you invite me to your housewarming party?" I asked without preamble. "I'm your sister. I took you in when you had nowhere else to go." The silence on the other end lasted just a moment too long. When Tommy spoke, his voice was different, cold, distant, like a stranger's. "That was your duty as my sister," he said flatly. "Family helps family. I don't owe you anything for doing what you were supposed to do. You're not entitled to an invitation just because you're my sister." Suddenly, there was a rustling sound, and Rachel's voice came on the line, dripping with venom. "Listen here, Lillian," she spat. "You're not wanted at our celebration. You never were. Did you think I forgot how you treated me while we stayed with you? How you tried to turn me into your personal maid? I never liked you, and I don't want you anywhere near our new home. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely dial Mom's number. Mom, my voice cracked. Did you know Tommy and Rachel didn't invite me to their housewarming? Yes, she replied, her voice unnaturally calm. We knew. And you're okay with this? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Lillian, Mom sighed. Maybe it's better this way. You know how Rachel feels about you, and honestly, well, you can be a bit overwhelming sometimes. It's their special day. They should celebrate with people who make them comfortable. Perhaps it's best if you don't come. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I hung up, feeling numb. Seeking some kind of explanation, I opened Facebook and went to Rachel's page. What I found there made my blood run cold. So excited for our housewarming next weekend. Her post read, We've invited all the people who truly matter to us. Well, almost all. There's one person who won't be there, thank goodness. Some people just can't handle seeing others succeed after they've lorded their help over you. No negative vibes, new home, only positive people. The comment section was worse. Is this about who I think it is? That evil witch you had to live with. So glad you're free from that hell. 8 months of torture. You're so strong for surviving that. Some people think helping family makes them Mother Teresa. My hands clenched into fists as I saw the post had been shared by Tommy, by Mom, even by Dad. Each share was accompanied by supportive comments about toxic people and moving on from negativity. A week later, I arrived at the address Aunt Marie had given me. The house was impressive. A large colonial in one of the city's most expensive neighborhoods. Cars lined the street, all luxury brands. The front door stood open, letting out the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. I walked in, my heart pounding. The foyer opened into a spacious living room filled with people and expensive clothes, all holding champagne flutes. I recognized faces from both sides of the family, though notably only the wealthy relatives had made the guest list. Uncle James stood near the fireplace, deep in conversation with someone. Our eyes met briefly, and we exchanged subtle nods. Lillian, Mom's harsh whisper caught my attention. She and Dad hurried over, their faces tight with anxiety. What are you doing here? You need to leave now. No, I said quietly, standing my ground. I won't. That's when Rachel spotted me. Her champagne glass nearly slipped from her manicured fingers. You. She shrieked, causing conversations to halt and heads to turn. How dare you come here? You weren't invited. Tommy appeared beside her, his face darkening when he saw me. The happy, sweet brother I remembered seemed completely gone, replaced by this cold stranger. What is she doing here? Rachel demanded, her voice rising hysterically. Get her out. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Aunt Marie stepped forward, her brow furrowed. Rachel, dear, this is Tommy's sister, she said diplomatically. She took you both in when you needed help. Sure, Rachel laughed bitterly. More like imprisoned us. You don't know what it was like living with her. She treated me like a servant, demanded I clean her house, cook her meals. She lorded it over us every single day, reminded us constantly that we were living off her charity. That's not true, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I turned to Tommy. Tell them, Tommy, tell them what really happened. Tell them how you did all the cooking, how I never asked Rachel to lift a finger. How could you? Tommy interrupted, his voice cold. You were cruel to us, Lillian. You made us feel worthless, dependent. Every day we spent in your house was hell. He gestured around the elegant room at the expensive furniture and art pieces. Look at what I've achieved on my own, without your help. I got my job at Morrison Technologies by myself. I earned every penny that bought this house. I don't owe you anything. Not gratitude, not an invitation, nothing. Tommy, I started, but he cut me off with a sharp gesture. Get out of my house, he said, pointing to the door. You're not welcome here. You never will be. The tension in the room was suffocating when a quiet voice cut through the silence. That's quite enough. Uncle James stood up from his armchair by the fireplace, his presence suddenly commanding everyone's attention. I believe some introductions are in order. He walked to the center of the room, his expression stern. Most of you know me as Tom's boss, the CEO of Morrison Technologies, but there's something else you should know. He paused, looking around the room. I'm also David's uncle, Lillian's late husband's uncle. The room erupted in confused whispers. Tommy's face had gone ghostly white. I returned to the States 12 years ago after spending decades abroad. Uncle James continued. That's why I wasn't at David and Lillian's wedding, why most of you didn't know about our connection. Uncle James's voice grew harder. But what you really need to know is that Tom didn't get his job at Morrison Technologies by himself. Lillian called me, begged me to give her brother a chance. Rachel's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. Nobody moved to clean it up. She asked me to keep it secret. Uncle James continued, his eyes fixed on Tommy. She didn't want to hurt your pride, didn't want you to feel like you needed your sister's help. She protected your ego even while you were living under her roof. Tommy started to speak, but Uncle James held up his hand. Today, I sat here and heard you disparage the sister who helped you escape homelessness. I've had enough of you lying about how she treated you, making fun of her on social media, and turning your own parents against her. His tone became stern. Tom, you're fired. I will not allow someone with such a bad reputation to work for my organization. Rachel cried out in a choked voice. But the mortgage, we just bought this house. Uncle James remarked icily, that's not my concern, and he walked to the door. I don't employ ungrateful people who bite the hand that feeds them. Then he walked away. Chaos erupted in the room. Rachel sobbed uncontrollably, contemplating monthly bills and property values as she fell onto the couch. Tommy stood still as Mom and Dad ran to him. This is your fault. Mom's face twisted in rage as she turned on me. How could you do this to your brother? Aunt Marie came forward. Helen, are you serious? Your daughter is the antagonist in this situation, even if she helps your son land a job and keeps it a secret to preserve his dignity. Other family members joined in, voicing their disagreements and choosing sides. I had had enough. I left the turmoil behind and left the house without saying a word. My phone rang at 7 in the morning the next day. Mom's voice sounded high-pitched. This has to be fixed. Give James a call and request that he return Tommy's employment. Due to their inability to pay for their home, your brother and Rachel are relocating to live with us. All of this is your fault. No, Mom, I muttered. Tommy took his decisions. He decided to fall for Rachel's falsehoods. He decided to turn on me. The hand that fed him was the one he chose to bite. He can now live with those decisions. I hung up and blocked all of their numbers, including my parents, Rachel's and Tommy's. Aunt Marie later informed me that Tommy and Rachel had indeed lost the house. They moved into my parents' little apartment, where Rachel supposedly makes everyone unhappy with her continuous complaints, because they couldn't afford the mortgage payments without his employment at Morrison Technologies. I continue to have dinner with Uncle James once a month, chat to Sarah once a week, and live in my peaceful home. I never urge him to change his mind, and he never apologizes for firing Tommy. After being torched, certain bridges ought to remain burned.